So aloha and welcome all of you for spending some time with me today and learning a little bit about my own practice and myself. But yes, my name is Marques Hanalei Marzan. I'm born and raised on the island of Oahu in a place called Kaneohe in He'eia, and have done various things with my life over the years. Started to get into weaving and working with natural fibers as a teenager, and pursued that practice as an undergraduate at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And from there, it opened up different pathways that has led me to where I am today. Currently working at the Bishop Museum in Honolulu, Hawaii. It's a state museum on natural history and culture, and I've been fortunate enough to been working at that institution for the past 24 years in various capacities. I'm currently holding two titles: the museum's cultural advisor and the Wayne Pitluck and Judith Pyle Curator for Cultural Resilience. And so through those two roles that I serve at the Bishop Museum, I'm able to bring together cultural practitioners, researchers, and everyone within the community together in ways that really support cultural perpetuation, innovation, imagination, but still having a grounded root in the cultural values and practices of Hawaii and the Pacific. So mahalo again. Let's start. Okay, let's. Why aren't you going? This is kind of weird. Why it's not moving? No. Do I have to close? I don't know. This little bar? And then, wait, let's see. Oh, there, perfect. Yeah, yeah. E ulu, kini o kia kua, ulu ka ne me kanalo, ulu o hi ala u koa me ka ie, a e mai ano ho I kou kuahu, e ia kawai la e wai e ola no e. Na au mākua mai ka la hiki a ka la kau, mai ka ho'oku I a ka halawai. Na au mākua ia ka hina kua, ia ka hinalo, ia ka ākau I galani, o ki hai I galani, o e I galani, nunulu I galani, ka holo I galani. E ia ka pula pula o ko o Hawaii, e mālama o ko ia māko. E ulu I galani, e ulu I ka honua, e ulu I ka pai aina o Hawaii. E ho mai ka ike, e ho mai ka ikaika, e ho mai ki aka mai, e ho mai ka mau popopono, e ho mai ka ike pāpālua, e ho mai ka mana, a mama wano. So typically when I begin sharing my own practice and presentations on Hawaii and my relationship with the art forms and my community, I like to acknowledge all of the world that surrounds us first, yeah, and that's what inspires us, and it gives us the life that we have, and to always remember that. So it began with the plant world, you know, all the different plants that are influential to Hawaiian culture and practice, followed by the animals and different guardian spirits that are kind of looked to as sources of protection, wisdom, guidance in all the things that we are of Hawaii. So acknowledging the place of Hawaii that has brought me life, that continues to inspire me, and hopefully is evident in the practices and in the works that I've created, imbued with all of the layers of story and creativity. So in the beginning, when I was a teenager, the first art form that I learned to kind of reawaken within my body and my hands was ulana, or weaving, or plaiting. And this is one of the fine mat styles of Hawaii, using a material a very fine diameter, about 2 millimeters in diameter. These strips are, so it's a very fine weave. But this is one of the pieces that I created that represents that practice that originally inspired me to pursue the different art forms that I currently understand and preserve through my art, as well as convey to all those that have interest in learning. And so my great-grandmother was a weaver from the island of Hawaii, and she unfortunately had passed away years before I was born, but I was fortunate to have been raised in the house that had a lot of things that she had created for my family. So my grandfather, my uncles, and my mom, there were things that surrounded me as I was growing up. And so the woven hat that she made for my grandfather was a source of inspiration that really pushed me to find a way to reawaken that practice within my family, as no one after my great-grandmother continued these art forms. My grandfather and his siblings, no one learned from their mother. None of the cousins really understood those practices and got perpetuated those art forms as well. And so when I was able to take a workshop, I was so passionate in trying to find a way to reawaken this understanding in my own hands, because it was something that I was dreaming about ever since I was a young boy. And so definitely, I'm fortunate I had a teacher that was able to share with me the understanding of weaving when I was a teenager, and it has taken me to where I am today. And so this is one of the art forms that started my practice. I continued learning different forms when I started my undergraduate program at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And I focused in fine arts, and through that program, I had amazing mentors. But one of them, her name is Maile Andrade, also a native Hawaiian fiber artist and practitioner and visual artist. And through those classes that she was teaching in the art department, I was able to understand and be introduced to different Hawaiian and Pacific Island art forms. So twining, so in this image here, some of the traditional style fish baskets and tools used in fishing. Net making, for the fishing and cordage. Here's an example of some of the net forms that I started to learn after all of the introduction techniques were shared with me in my undergraduate program. But this particular technique is called pu'u pu'u. The knot itself is this very elaborate barrel knot, as you can see on the image. And it's a technique that's only found in Hawaii, in the Pacific, only found in Hawaii. And the technique was used to create these carrying nets as you can see, to transport food and personal possessions of individuals when they were traveling from place to place. So these nets were a layer of protection to keep those containers safe. If you bumped it against a rock or a tree, those dense barrel knots provided a buffer and a layer of protection. And so definitely these concepts of protection and bringing together different elements in the weaving, these separate small strands being woven together and interlocked, coming together, have always been kind of driving forces in my own practice and fundamental concepts that I've used. And so this is a traditional fan called a pe'ahi, and it was reserved for our chiefly class in Hawaii. And It incorporates multiple techniques. So the blade of the fan is a plated technique using the pandanus or lauhala, and then the handle part with the different patterns and designs are a twining technique, like the fish baskets. And so it's a combination of those two techniques. And this is based off of a traditional form that would typically have been using, in the instance of the black cord, cord made from human hair. Yeah? So twisted, hair would be gathered, twisted into cordage, and used and wrapped into the handle. And because of that practice of using human hair in this form, it placed it into the category of sacred, or layers that would typically be reserved for chiefly practices. In Hawaiian understanding and belief and practice, anything that comes from a person, their bones, your teeth, your hair, anything had the spiritual energy or mana of that individual. Yeah? And so the use of hair in this form of making it into cordage and then becoming the cordage used in the manufacture imbued that item with that energy. And so typically these fans were reserved, again, for chiefly use. The hair would have been collected from family members, individuals that were part of their retinue, those individuals that have committed themselves to that individual chief, and would offer hair as a symbol of their commitment to that individual. So the making of cordage from all of these different sources of hair and then bound into a piece like this really imbued the piece with many, many levels and individual mana and those connections all together. And so these fans were used as a symbol of one of their symbols of authority. Chiefs would have feather capes, helmets, particular necklaces called leiniho palawa, and then this particular style of fan. And one kind of amazing account that has been recorded over the since early days by some of the early visitors to Hawaii note that in times when two chiefs would come together for say a battle or a challenge, between two different forces. Those two leaders would come to the battlefield in their finery, in their feather capes, their helmets, but they wouldn't be carrying weapons like all of their other members that were behind them. They all would have weapons. The two chiefs were carrying fans. And this is, to me, when I heard that account, I would see this style of fan being the type of fan that they would have been carrying. As you can see, it's this crescent-shaped kind of blade kind of form. But through the challenges, the chiefs would cut one another in their retort, in their challenges with one another, and through the gestures of the chief holding the fan would be kind of symbolically slicing them and cutting them open with their words. And so it's an amazing kind of, for me, layering of stories, traditions, and cultural practice, all in a tangible piece that you can see here. So this style of fan has been something that I've been very passionate about, and one of the few people currently producing fans of this type in Hawaii. And as time progressed, in my undergraduate program, I was introduced to different kinds of materials from the Pacific and the greater world. And this is a wearable art piece that I created after being introduced to the traditional practices of the peoples of the North in Alaska. And traditionally they would use seal intestine to make some of their rain parka. And this is an ode to that practice, as I used pig intestine to create this piece, and processing it in the same way that was done in Alaska, drying it out and then cutting it and working it in that dried state, but utilizing it in a form that presents it in a very different way. This, you can see all of the bottom parts are very soft and light and almost ethereal in that quality. The wind just blows it quite effortlessly. And in Hawaiian, the term for intestine is na'au. And na'au means literally means your intestine, but it's also the spiritual location of one's emotion and being. And so every person's na'au was often very guarded. You wouldn't ever really share that your na'au with just anyone. You wouldn't. You would have to kind of build that layer of relationship and trust to really open up and share that intimacy of sharing your na'au with others. So for me, in creating this particular piece, it was a turnaround, right? Because you're not always hidden with inside of your body, and you typically wouldn't share that out to everyone. But in this form, I wanted to change that conversation and have it visible, have na'au visible in a way that, for me, when I created the piece, I was basically saying I am not afraid of people harming or hurting me because of what they think of me, and I am putting my internal self out there to the world, and I am not afraid. And so that's what this garment kind of represented to me when I was producing and creating it, and over the years it's kind of expanded in some of the other art forms that I continue to practice. But yeah, this was a great kind of moment for me in which I said to the world, basically, I opened myself up to the world, saying this is who I am, and I don't care about what you think. So this is another series of pieces wearable pieces, as well as two-dimensional pieces on the wall that I created back in 2017 for the Honolulu Biennial. Again, speaking to two-dimensional, three-dimensional dialogue with one another. And so the 2D panels on the wall are complemented by the three-dimensional wearable pieces on the 4 pedestals. And they each represent different aspects of Hawaiian ancestry and guardians. And so in the Hawaiian pantheon, there are 4 main kind of deities and protectors that preside over all aspects of daily life. And so with all of their different qualities that they represent, the sun, the darkness, the fresh water, salt water, there are all these different layers in which they interconnect. And so they're physically represented in these different forms. And I don't have a picture of it, but in this particular installation, I had a third component where I created 8 complementary wearable garments that were actually modeled on people and walked around the space. So there was the 3-dimensional static forms, the 2-dimensional forms, and then a moved performance piece that activated the entire space, bringing together all of those concepts of ancestry, our guardians always being around us and in every form. Okay. So continuation of the knots, the net carriers into the form of wearable garments, and that idea of transferring the concept of protection onto a human form. Yeah, in these spiritual garments of protection, that to ensure that those that are wearing them have that layer of security. And so this is a layering of those elements. I've had the fortune enough to create large-scale commission pieces in different locations in Hawaii and around the world. And this is one of the net installations that I created for a restaurant in Waikiki on Oahu. And they really wanted to connect to the chiefly history of the area. And so this is what it ended up being for that particular project. This piece here is actually in the gallery on the wall, but it's in a form represented in this picture in the form of a skirt, which what it was made and intended to be used as. So a wearable piece. And I made it in 2020 when we first went into lockdown in March. I started it in March, and I continued to work on it for the rest of the year and completed it on Christmas Eve. I could have completed it earlier, but because we were all locked down, and I wanted this to be my physical way of acknowledging all of the family and friends and people in my life that have a great deal of meaning to me, as well as our greater community, and sending out prayers of protection and well-being and health to everyone in the world. And so as I was making each knot, I was reciting different traditional Hawaiian prayers and intentions and concepts of protection and healing and well-being in every knot. I didn't actually know how big this piece was going to be when I was making it. And so I started the first row and I just put my arms out, and it ended just being the width of my arms. So that was 50 knots in the first row. And as I just started to go down, it started to fill up the floor of my living room, and I couldn't move very much, when it was flat out on the ground. So I decided, okay, I think we're getting close. So I think when I did the final count, it was about 38 or 37 rows of knots that I had made by that point. And I said, well, maybe I'll end it at 40, a nice round number, 50 rows across, 40 that way. And so I finished it and everything, and I started to do, it was like, 240 times 50, that's 2,000 knots. That's a lot of knots that I created during the process. But then I thought again, and then I recounted. The first row is 50, but to create a nice rectangular piece, you have to add an additional knot in every other row to balance it out so that it would stay straight. And because there are 40 rows, half of that is 20, so it ended up being 2,020 knots when I made it in 2020. So for me, it just was, it was not planned at all. It just happened to come out that way. And I think it really speaks to how I was going about doing this. This was my own kind of personal way of sending out healing energy to the world and to my family. And it just manifested in a way that literally aligned with the time that it was made. Yeah. And so I've had the fortune to wear this piece in various ceremonies in Hawaii. It's traveled into different countries around the world as well. And it's always it always carries that concept of healing, wellness in all of the iterations that it's been presented. So it continues to carry that story with it wherever it goes. And it's currently here for all of you to see here in the exhibition. Another large-scale installation at a hotel in Waikiki, using the knotting techniques, but in a form that represents the Hawaiian Islands in the net. So you can see the large island of Hawaii, Maui, and all of the islands, the main islands in the Hawaiian chain. And the idea of string and cord and knots kind of interlocking us all together, and making us interconnected in that way. So the space that the hotel created, this lounge space, was dedicated to voyaging. So some of our traditional voyaging practitioners and artists that create beautiful imagery surrounding the concept of voyaging are all represented in this space. And so this was my contribution to that, the space's telling of that story. So you can see a little bit closer some of the knot work that this is made with. This is a 46-foot length and 7 feet high. So it's a pretty considerable size work in this particular hotel, the Outrigger Reef Hotel in Waikiki. Yeah. Another piece that I was working on for a hotel on the island of Kauai. They wanted to utilize a lot of the natural fiber plants that were used in house thatching. And so I incorporated all of those materials in this large scale piece. As you can see, I'm sitting in the center of it. There were 3 pieces of this scale that were part of the ask. And so, yeah, I didn't have any space large enough to create them outside of my. So this is my garage. So I had to park my car outside, and this is where this is the floor of my garage, and I'm working on it. And as I mentioned, I work at the Bishop Museum as my full-time job. So after work, I work on it at nighttime. So it's the balance of those things. So incorporating natural fibers and all of those techniques together, referencing the traditional forms, but bringing the materials into conversation with each other in different ways. And back in 2024, I completed a master's in fine arts. It took almost 20 years for me to go back to school, but I found a program in Vancouver, Canada at Emily Carr University of Art and Design that I had been introduced to some of the staff that worked there at an artist gathering that I attended, and it just happened that the program, I really enjoyed the direction of the program and all the individuals that were part of the faculty that I would be potentially have the opportunity to engage with. And so this is my master's thesis exhibition. It was a 2-year low residency program, and so this is the presentation of it in the second year. You can see 8 garments using all kinds of materials, and as well as the vertical banners extending upwards. The dark black pieces are made with aluminum mesh, and then the white pieces are made with silk cord. And I did all of it. And the use of the different techniques that I have kind of honed over the many years, the knotting technique here, but represented in a different form than just the carrying nets, but still drawing inspiration and paying tribute to the traditional forms. Using different kinds of materials and fibers. So coconut rope is a material in this form, but again drawing upon the various techniques, but forming them in more contemporary and modern ways. And during this process of going through a master's program, I was introduced to, I actually fell upon this material as I was walking through the aisles of a hardware store in Canada. And this is copper mesh that its original function, or its primary function in non-artist hands, is to wrap your garden beds to protect your vegetables from being eaten by slugs and snails. Yeah. So copper is a material that slugs and snails don't like to cross, walk over. And so this is used to like wrap around the bottom so the slugs don't go eat your vegetables. But I didn't see that when I saw the material, and this is some of the works, and you'll see this piece as well in the exhibition. It's in a different form. This one has the like a lower skirt piece and a cape form on the top, whereas represented here it's kind of blended together. But yeah, these are the two pieces that's in the exhibition today. This is a piece made with the silk cord that I mentioned those vertical banners are made out of. I came upon this material actually in Vancouver as well at a weaving studio, and this particular silk cord is called kibiso, and it's the outer layer of the silk cocoons. And typically the fibers from that outer layer is very coarse and hard to work with. And so the finer inner layers is what most of the silk threads are made from. It's really soft and silky. But the outer layers have all of the kind of protective shell that would keep this cocoon safe. And so often all of this silk material would just be discarded in the kind of mainstream silk industry. But there are small scale cottage industry businesses in different parts of Japan that have been making this kind of specialty cord with this material that would typically be thrown away. And so I really loved the idea of repurposing this material that was considered garbage, that was turned into this beautiful cord that has this very stiff and rigid quality, not like what you think of silk. And for me, making pieces. And so this is a netting technique that I use to create this piece. But and the idea of not letting things go to waste is something that I try to perpetuate in my practice and share with those that are starting their journey or continuing these concepts of imagination and creativity. This is a knotting, elaboration of the knotting techniques that are in all of my wearable pieces that we have in the gallery. This is also here in the space. But it's one continuous cord. It's one continuous piece. So it's just binding upon itself and then interlocking and interconnecting with itself. And so, for me, this idea that this one continuous piece of cordage can become so many different things and make so many different connections, and depending on how and when they intersect, they create different forms and shapes. And so again, this is it's very kind of organic and fluid, but still based in traditional practice. Yeah, copper mesh, also here in the gallery. I was very happy that I ran into this material at the hardware store in Canada. It's opened so many different possibilities in how it could be manipulated and used into different forms. And it's made out of metal, right? So it's gonna last pretty much forever. And because it's pure copper, it has the natural qualities of copper of its aging with patina. It changes with the environment that it's in, and it'll it will age like we all do. in its own way in time. Yeah, stainless steel mesh. Same time I ran into this copper mesh, I found stainless steel mesh. This is a larger scale mesh that I found later on, but the first stainless steel mesh that I came across was in the same scale and size of the copper mesh. And that was made for filling in holes in your house to keep bugs from crawling through the holes to get into your house. So they would just crumple it up like little balls of paper and stuff it into the holes in your house to keep critters from entering your house. And I was like, that's not what I'm going to use it for either. And so I've used both the stainless steel and copper in a lot of the wearable pieces I've created more recently. So this is an ode to the twining practices, so the different traditional baskets and all of the stages in which a basket is made. So there's on the top part we have different three-dimensional forms of the basket in various stages of completion, from one completed to the various forms, and then the lower half are all of the individual starts of a basket, and before they start to come up into the three-dimensional form. So it's the different stages of this twining practice represented in this wearable piece. Yeah, you can see this cord adornment or lei that I'm wearing is also inspired this art installation. A large-scale piece. This is about 18 feet in width and 6.5 feet tall. And just again, drawing upon the idea of the different thicknesses of the material, the quality of the fibers, color combination, and how they all interact with one another. But still imbued with the concepts and sentiments of binding and protection. So this installation that I did two years ago now, maybe 1.5 years ago. Installed this in Honolulu, in one of our parks in downtown Honolulu at Thomas Square, and using the steel and copper mesh to create this installation here. You can see this portrait of me is of me wearing a piece that I created at an arts gathering in New Zealand. And I brought along with me those materials, and I created this piece while I was there, as well as having the opportunity to share those understandings and techniques with all of the other artists gathered. And one of the artists was a photographer, and she was offering portraits for all the artists present. So I decided to just put this on, and she's like, "That'll be perfect. Just sit down." I was like, "Okay." Yeah, and then this is a piece that I made for a wearable art show just last month in Honolulu at our State Museum, Capitol Modern, and so this piece, along with this piece, are on display at Capitol Modern right now in their gallery until next month. But yeah, these materials have always, I think materials have always presented themselves to me in different ways, and this is just the most recent form that I've started to utilize in my practice. And not to say that all of the older materials are not incorporated into the things that I do, but it's just these have presented them currently, and I still use a lot of, if not all of the materials that I've learned to work with over the years in different times and different forms. Yeah. So, mahalo nui for your time in coming and spending and hearing a little bit about my own practice and my own art form. So mahalo. So I'd like to offer some time and space for questions. If anyone has anything that might be on your mind.
Where do you store all this?
So I brought all of the works in 2 suitcases with me on the airplane as my checked luggage. So they live in suitcases in my studio. Yeah.
How, when you work with the copper mesh and the stainless steel, how are your hands? How are you projecting your hands? How do you work with it?
I just work with them with I actually don't wear gloves or anything. I'm just I'm working with straight from the mesh. I think the gauge of the metal is so fine that it's not a hard kind of rigid wire, that like if you really, it would put a lot of strain on your hands, and it actually is quite malleable, very flexible, very fluid. I think the only part that maybe the tricky part is when you have to cut it. And then you have to kind of bend it down so that you don't have all the ends kind of poking out. But because the gauge of the mesh is so fine, it acts almost like a rope, a cord, but it has the ability to retain shape and volume because it's metal. Yeah, which I love, and exploring those different ways of keeping like the long streamlined forms that reference cords and fibers, but also opening them up in forms that kind of speak to sculpture and different concepts and techniques. Yeah. Yes.
Will the copper ultimately turn green as it oxidizes?
Yes. Yeah. So it has, copper has multiple patina stages, and green is definitely further down the line. It usually turns, this a darker kind of rust, and then it gets into a darker brown, and then it typically goes to green. And depending on the different things that it's in the environment, it will turn blue as well. It can turn blue. Yes.
I'd like to maybe ask a question about color.
Yes.
So I'm noticing sort of this muted color palette here, and then there was some earlier works that had some other. I'm just wondering, were you interested in natural dyes at one point, or what was the?
Yeah. So for me the question was of the works that I have here are quite muted in color, and if I've had worked with the use of natural dyes and other colors in my work. And so I do love using natural dyes when I can. The current works that you have here aren't very much, I haven't utilized dye processes in these particular works, but I really enjoy using natural dyes, earth pigments, plant dyes, and other sources of pigment to bring in those different layers of visual, appearance, but also adding those kind of the energy of those different kinds of materials into the work as well. But yeah, I really enjoy using natural pigments. I think one of the things that I've been trying to learn more about is how to make colors color fast. Because a lot of natural dyes, they fade quite quickly. If you put it out in the sun too long, fade away. So there's different fixatives or mordants that are used to kind of make those colors color fast. And so, we don't have a lot of kind of history or stories of the mordants and fixatives in Hawaiian practice. We know the different plants and fibers that were used to make the different dyes, but the recipes on how to keep those dyes colors vibrant and enduring haven't really been preserved in that way. So I think a lot of the people that are doing that right now are exploring and sharing with one another. And sometimes it's just one little thing that makes all of the difference. For instance, my teacher, Maile Andrade, she had visited, was participating in a textile and dye conference in Southeast Asia, and saw that the people there were using turmeric, which is a beautiful yellow dye, right? And beautiful yellow dye, and we have that in Hawaii as well. We call it olena. But at that conference, she noticed that they crushed the turmeric with another material that we have, the candle nut, the kernels of the candle nut, or kukui. So raw kukui nut kernels and the rhizomes of the turmeric, and crushed them together, and dyed the fabric in that mixture, and that made the color, the yellow color, color fast. Typically, if you don't have anything, if it's just straight turmeric, if you put a beautiful bright red, bright yellow piece of dyed fabric into the sun, 20 minutes, it basically disappears. All the color will be gone because the light, this exposure to light is what fades it out. But with the inclusion of that one ingredient, it made it color fast. And she was told that that's the technique that was used, that's continued to be used to dye the yellow robes of the Tibetan monks. That bright, that vibrant yellow, robes that they wear, along with their dark maroon. That yellow is dyed with turmeric.
Do you think with the preserved kappa in museums that those were probably used with kukui nut to make those colors stay? Because they are incredible, the colors that have stayed on those pieces.
So some of those early kappa pieces that exist in collections, particularly at the Bishop Museum, are quite vibrant still till today, and there are a couple of examples that where you can see that there was like an oil, like the kukui oil, incorporated into the dye because it's still present on the finished pieces of kappa. So that definitely could be one of the means in which particular dyes were made color fast in older Hawaiian kappa. Yeah. Yes.
I was just curious, when you find new material like the copper mesh, is there a period where you have to kind of start understanding the mechanics of how it's going to work with you and get used to it? And have you also found other materials that just people are too unwieldy to kind of like to use in a same way?
Yeah. So the question is, when I encounter new materials, what is the learning curve of working with those materials? And in the example of the copper mesh, when I saw the material, it looked very much like the netting and what's called looping processes that are fundamental to some of the classical fiber techniques. And so, I understood that it was all the character of what that material would do. It could be stretching and expanding in different ways because of the technique utilized in their construction. So in that instance, I kind of knew what it could do, and because I had the ability to touch it, I could feel what quality it would have. Yeah, and so if it was a thicker gauge mesh, it would be rigid. It could stand up on its own, and that definitely would have a very different character and quality. And I think with those kinds of materials, I would probably have to have more of a learning curve, because those aren't qualities that I'm familiar with with fiber techniques. Those start to become like the qualities of actual metal sculptures. Standing on its own, and creating all of that natural form just by how the materials are manipulated. Whereas with fiber techniques, you can actually kind of manipulate the fibers to do what you want it to do, versus just kind of like listening to the character of the material in that way. So it sometimes is a little bit more of a learning curve, but generally the materials that I come across have a lot of connection or relation to textile and the qualities associated with textiles.
Marques, there's a question from the Zoom audience.
Oh, okay.
Since you work
Yeah, so I showcased one of the traditional carrying nets that had the barrel knot in it. There's one net in the museum's collection that has an amazing knot that is used in that one example. There's no other example of a net that I know of that has this particular knot construction in. And this particular net is at the Bishop Museum in Honolulu. To think about it, these barrel knots are all interconnected with the different arms that are created to create the interlocking mesh. But this one particular knot utilizes 17 of these barrel knots to create one little cluster. And then you would jump to the next row, and then you make your knot, and then you make another cluster with another 17. And so this one net has 40 knots in each row. There's 4 rows, and each of those knots have a cluster at each of those knots. So 40 times 3 to 120 of these clusters of knots around the whole surface. And that would be that particular knot is the most intricate knot that our old people ever created. And no one ever knew how to do it because it was just this one example. Even some of the master elders that kind of preserved this practice over the years didn't know how to make that knot. They knew how to do the basic knot, but that particular knot, they were dumbfounded. And so several years back, one of my dear friends from the island of Hawaii, he's a professor at the University of Hawaii in Hilo, and he also is a knot maker, and he got really interested in making cordage regalia for dancing in hula. And he also was very inspired by that particular net with those knots, because that's the only one. And so he kind of jokingly told me, it's like, Marques, you go figure it out and then teach me. and so I looked at it. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. And I looked at it. I tried different things. I was like, nope, that didn't work. Nope, that didn't work. That didn't work. And I just went to sleep one night, woke up the next morning, and I was like, oh, I had never tried that thing. And so I just picked up some string and started to do what I thought of after waking up that one day. And I did it, and I was able, that one little thing that I tried actually allowed me to complete it, to accomplish it. And it was a process that someone would never really think of if you were just taught how to do the steps, because it was kind of doing something within something instead of just making them in consecutive order. And so it really kind of changed my mind, my understanding and perception of how we look at things. Sometimes they might present themselves in one way, but there's so many other, things that make it to get to that form, to accomplish in that way. So I think that's definitely a piece of mine that has been a great inspiration for me, just to realize that there's so many different ways of looking at things that makes basically the world possible. Yeah, there's the endless iterations on how things can be put together is an amazing thing to think about. Yeah, especially as an artist and creator, that that you can kind of explore and expand so many different things. Some people might think that's a little too overwhelming because there's too many possibilities, but for me, I look at them as gifts in every form. Yeah. What?
question.
Sure.
Grace Kang says beautiful work. Is there a material you're still experimenting with?
Um,
And a way to make it.
yeah. So the question was if there's a material that I'm still experimenting with. No, well, all of the things that I have in this exhibition, as well as what was presented on my presentation, are things that I've come across in the last couple of years, and as well as some of the early materials that I've kind of learned the different techniques with. But beyond the copper and stainless steel mesh, I haven't come across anything new. Those are the most recent kind of additions to my material repertoire, but I actually look forward to the next material that kind of catches my eye, and how I can incorporate that into my work. Yeah. And yeah.
Is it true that your work, your display is on display until September?
Yes. So this exhibition in the Craft in America Center will remain here installed for 3 months, and it closes September 12th. Yeah, yeah.
Dumb question. How do you pay the rent, brother?
So I'm fortunate that I've known a number of the staff, part of the Craft in America organization, for a number of years, and the gallery, the gallery person here I've known for a number of years, and she and I have worked on different projects, and she had shared with me that there's an opening in the exhibition schedule, and she just offered it to me as a means to expand the awareness of the local community here to my own practice. And so it's I don't have to pay rent. I don't have to pay rent. It was a invitation by the organization to showcase my work in this space, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity to have my work in this facility and this community, and hopefully inspire others to maybe learn a little bit more about Hawaiian practices and techniques that these works draw upon so heavily. Yes.
So as a Hawaiian, we are so very proud of you, Marques.
Oh. Thank you.
And do you still have some of your grandmother's items?
Yeah. So the question is, do I still have some of my great-grandmother's items? Yes. So the hats that my great-grandmother wove are now in my care. And so I take care of my grandfather's hats and the other hats that were made by my great-grandmother. My mom still has the Hawaiian quilt that she had made, but she's told me that that's for me to care for when the time comes. But again, those pieces of my great-grandmother have been the source of inspiration since I was a young boy, to taking me to where I am today. And I'm again so very grateful for all of the people that have come across my life and has shared with me the different insights and techniques and materials that has brought me to this place. And I believe it's my responsibility now to ensure that all of the teachings that they shared with me gets passed on to someone else. I don't want the feeling like my great-grandmother and not having anyone to share what she understood to people in her family or anyone that she could do that with. So actually everyone that I engage with in workshops or in one-on-ones teaching sessions, I actually have them make a commitment to when they feel comfortable and confident in their practice to find someone else and teach and allow them to pass that knowledge on to someone else.